I want to talk about the first time that I went down to, I had an opportunity to go to Huntington Park. I mean, not Huntington Park, I mean Bethune Park. And at Bethune Park, man, I couldn't go when I was younger because I was Crip walking at a party one night. And this guy named Stanley Clark seen me. It was these two twin girls out the Pueblos that lived on my block, Arlene and Darlene. And Arlene used to always tell me how good looking I was and how her mother would love me if I went to the projects. But one night, man, I was Crip walking, and I was Crip walking in the house, and I had a jacket that Squeak and them had wrote on. And I was practicing for the big Crip walking contest that was at Bethune Park. And I was getting my practice in, and this guy seen me. I never forget, his name was Stanley Clark. He used to have a Jeff jersey on, and he used to play for Jeff, and he used to be on a 10-speed, but he was like a agitator. He was from the Pueblos, but back then the Pueblos and the Outlaws was at Bethune Park, and they had the big Outlaws and they had the baby Outlaws, and the villains used to hang up there. Because I remember Outlaws was all the way from Gage almost to Aliso Village. There was the 60 Outlaws all the way down. You had the Pueblos, you had the villains. And man, I remember one night, man, we was at the park and we was having a Crip walking contest. And the Crip walking contest was, man, I mean, it was wild, man. It was a guy, man. It was a young guy named Oscar, man. He was from 6 Deuce. Oscar was a young guy, but he was kind of tall for his age, and he used to hang with Quake. And Big Quake, man, I never seen a guy, man, that had hands like that. This guy's hands was kind of like hanging a little bit down below his knees. That's how long his arms were. But a lot of 6 Deuce guys, that's the way they was built. The 6 Deuce guys, they was built in a way that it was like guerrilla soldiers, you know. And man, we was at the park, man, and we was having a Crip contest, and Monty Ross, he was one of the facilitators, and we had a bunch of guys that was Crip walking, man, and Monty Ross, man, he took my name off the roster, man. I was kind of waiting for my name, and little Oscar kept Crip walking, and they had to stop the music because everybody was following him, couldn't. He was like a James Brown with Crip walking. And then we had a girl named Weedy. I remember Weedy won the girl Crip walking contest, and Oscar won the boy Crip walking contest. But it was a lot of guys got in it, like Monty Ross. It was a bit, I don't know if Quake got in, the big Quake, a little Quake. But man, that park, man, it was. Then that night, man, that's the night that the park changed forever. Somehow Cobra got into it with a girl that used to be a cheerleader. She was out of over there by the Pueblos, but she lived it on I forgot her name. I ended up getting a job by her at McDonald's. But she had a baby by Kevin Wright at a young age. But I remember Cobra did something to the girl. And she had a brother named Chinese John, and it was Edo, it was Sinbad, which his name is Tony Jackson. And I remember Tony Jackson. We all played football together. Tony Jackson, you had Bay Bear, you had a lot of the villains. You had Cal, you had a Chinese Cal, you had the boy, the Gibson, he had the funny color eyes, and the girls loved him. And man, somehow they got into it, and I seen Edo hit this guy with a double punch, like with both hands. Edo was kind of like, he was a big guy. I think they ended up calling him Mr. 56. He had a limo, and the dude T Tiger used to always talk about the villains in the Pebble, because T Tiger came from down there. And I used to get into it with T Tiger all the time, but I remember when they jumped on Cobra, and I was there that night, and the homies, the 7-6ers was there. The 7-6 Shack Boys, they were Shack Boys back then, I think. And it was some 7-4s there, which Raymond started. And it was some 7 trays, and it was a little bit of us. And I remember that they jumped on Cobra, and I think Snake was there, and I think Spook was there. It was a bunch of Crips, and it was Reggie Bird and Big Dave and all of it. It was RP, Whitey, Ray Rat. I mean, man, it was a girl named Kay, Hank, the twins, Derek. It was a lot of people from the park. Levi, man, it was a bunch of guys, man, that was at the park that night, man. It was like it was like a title fight, and they jumped on Cobra, man, and Quake was there. The park was a lot of bloods there before this happened, and him and Quake was when I seen them line up in the street like they was boxers, man. And I see this dude Quake come walking, man, like he was a silverback gorilla, man. And him and Hightower kind of like clashed like Marvin Hagler and Tommy Hearns, man. And I had seen Quake one day at the park, and he was showing dudes his tattoo. But I didn't know that this guy, man, was gonna turn out to be one of the most hand fighters of his time. And I used to see him hit dudes, man. I used to see him knock dudes out of their shoes, man. But he had another brother named KK, and I really never seen KK that much, but I think KK had just got out of jail for murder. But man, I mean, this fight that night, man, him and Hightower, man, they clashed, man. And I don't know how Quake hit him so hard. It was like that punch that Muhammad Ali threw in the fight when he fought Sonny Liston. It was like a phantom punch. And all I seen was Hightower back up, and he was bouncing, and bouncing. All I seen was blood come out his forehead, and I see Quake like smiling like, man, you don't want none of this, dude. And I was like, wow. I had heard about his hands, but I always seen Little Quake. And Little Quake, he was always a little guy. He had like a young man's voice, and they used to always say, man, that's Little Quake right there, man. That's Little Quake. But they had another brother named Bruce, and Bruce was more like a quiet guy, man. And in those that Quake family, I think they lived on 59th, and you had a Big J, and you had a lot of the guys on that street, man. Jesse, and you had Whitey, the other Whitey. And that's when that night, man, the park completely changed from Bloods to Crips. Because the Bethune Park used to have a thing called 60 Outlaws. And they kind of like disappeared. You had a guy named 20. 20 was leader of the Baby Outlaws. And Big Dave was the leader of the Big Outlaws. And you had this Chinese guy, I think, and he used to always be throwing karate and like jabbing at people. Man, I mean that Bethune Park, man. And they had a guy named Craig Stone and Barry Stone, and Jenna, and his sister name was Joni, was the prettiest black woman I ever seen in my life. And that guy, dog, and that boy, this was right before this happened. They had a guy named Igor. Igor was Craig Stone, but Barry had got found dead, I think. And Igor like picked up the mantle, man. And Igor was a guy, man. He was a little black dude, real short. He had a kind of swag, because you know the Outlaws, the Bloods used to dress a certain way. And they used to dress with these hats and the different things. And sometimes you would see Igor real clean, man. But I'm not saying he was dirty, I'm just saying he would be real clean. And Igor, man, you had to watch him, man, because his name was Igor for a reason. I don't know where he got that name. I think Igor came from, there was a mad scientist like Dr. Frankenstein. He had a partner named Igor. And Igor had a name, man. It was real strange, because I never met anybody named was Igor. And he ruled, and he ran around that park, man. He was short in stature, but he was a force, man. And Igor, and that park, man, it was wild, man, because it flipped over from Bloods to Crips. And I've never seen a lot of those guys, man. I remember Renee, they used to call him Scar. He was always in jail. And you had a bunch of those guys over there, man. I always wanted to go to the park, but I couldn't because they knew I was a Crip, and they labeled me as a Crip when I was in elementary school, so I couldn't go to the park.